It was supposed to be the perfect holiday, a family getaway under the warm Portuguese sun. But in just one night, everything changed. A little girl vanished from her bed, and what followed became one of the most baffling and controversial missing persons cases in modern history. This is the story of Madeleine McCann, the case that shook the world. On April 28, 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann, doctors from Leicestershire, England, arrived in the resort town of Praia da Luz, Portugal. They brought their 3 children, 2-year-old twins, Sean and Amelie, and their eldest, Madeleine, who was just 3 years old. The McCanns were joined by a group of close friends, many of them doctors as well, who had children of their own. They called themselves the Tapas 7, and together they had planned a week of sun, relaxation, and family bonding. The Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz offered what seemed like the perfect setup. Families could enjoy the pool, the beach, and the relaxed atmosphere. For parents, it had an additional appeal. The resort's apartments were located close to a tapas restaurant, where adults could dine in the evenings while still being within walking distance of their sleeping children. It was a routine the McCanns and their friends quickly adopted. By May 3rd, they had settled into their holiday rhythm. During the day, the group would go swimming, play tennis, or head down to the beach. In the evening, once the children were asleep, the adults would gather at the tapas bar for dinner and drinks. They took turns checking on their children every 20 to 30 minutes. It was a system they believed was safe, until it wasn't. That night, May 3rd, the McCann children were put to bed around 7 p.m. Madeleine, wearing a pair of pink pajamas with Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh on them, was tucked into bed alongside her twin siblings. At around 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry joined their friends at the Tapas restaurant, located about 50 meters away from their apartment. The group laughed, ate, and enjoyed their evening, with each parent periodically excusing themselves to check on their children. At around 9:05 p.m., Jerry left the table and went to apartment 5A to check on Madeleine and the twins. He later reported that everything seemed fine. He looked in on them, saw all 3 children asleep, and returned to the restaurant. But just minutes later, at approximately 9:15 p.m., another member of the group, Jane Tanner, got up from the table to check on her own daughter. As she walked past the McCann's apartment, she noticed something unusual. Across the street, she saw a man carrying a small child dressed in light-colored pajamas. The child appeared to be asleep, her arms dangling as the man held her. At the time, Tanner thought little of it. After all, she assumed it was just another parent carrying their child to bed. At 9:30 p.m., another friend, Matthew Oldfield, offered to check on the McCann children while he looked in on his own. He reported that the twins were asleep and noticed nothing unusual. However, he admitted he hadn't actually looked directly at Madeleine's bed. He only listened for sounds in the room and assumed everything was fine. Then, at around 10 p.m., it was Kate McCann's turn. She walked back to the apartment, expecting to find her 3 children sleeping soundly. But as she entered the bedroom, a chilling scene unfolded before her. The twins were in their cots, undisturbed, but Madeleine's bed was empty. The window was open, the shutters raised. Panic surged through Kate as she ran back to the restaurant, shouting, "Madeleine's gone." The evening descended into chaos. Guests and staff from the resort joined the search. Neighbors scoured the streets with flashlights. People called out Madeleine's name, hoping she had wandered off, but there was no sign of her. Portuguese police were called, arriving on the scene just after 11 p.m. At first, they treated the case as a possible missing child who had wandered away. But as the hours stretched into the night with no trace of Madeleine, the possibility of an abduction became more likely. Word spread quickly. By morning, Praia da Luz was swarming with journalists, cameras, and police officers. Posters with Madeleine's face were printed and circulated. Tourists and locals were urged to look for a little girl with blonde hair, blue-green eyes, and a distinctive mark in her right eye, the collarbone, a rare defect that made her pupil appear misshaped. It was a feature her parents hoped would make her instantly recognizable. The investigation began immediately. Police interviewed the McCanns and their friends, documenting the timeline of the night. They canvassed the resort, knocking on doors, and questioned other guests. They searched apartments, roadsides, and empty lots. Roadblocks were set up, airports and border crossings were alerted. But as quickly as the case gained international attention, problems began to surface. The initial police response was criticized as slow and disorganized. The crime scene had not been properly secured. The apartment had been entered by multiple people before forensic experts could examine it, potentially contaminating evidence. Key witnesses were not interviewed until days later. Meanwhile, Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child took on new significance. Could this have been Madeleine being taken from her bed? Police circulated descriptions of the man, but no solid leads emerged. In the days that followed, the McCanns made emotional appeals to the public. They spoke to the press, pleading for their daughter's safe return. "Please, if you have her, let her come home," Kate begged through tears. The case exploded across global headlines. Newspapers from London to New York ran front-page stories. Television channels broadcast live updates. Millions of people around the world now knew Madeleine's face. The question was, where was she? As the investigation pressed forward, theories began to emerge. Some believed Madeleine had been kidnapped by a stranger, perhaps part of a child trafficking ring. Others wondered if someone closer to the family might be involved. Every lead was pursued, every room examined, but answers remained elusive. What began as a family holiday had spiraled into an international mystery. Within hours, the McCanns' lives and the world's attention had changed forever. Madeleine McCann was missing, and the search for her had only just begun. By the morning of May 4th, 2007, Praia da Luz was transformed. What had been a quiet seaside town was now flooded with journalists, television crews, and police officers. Reporters from around the world gathered outside the Ocean Club Resort, their cameras pointed toward apartment 5A. Every moment, every tear, every word from the McCann family was broadcast to millions of viewers across the globe. The Portuguese police, known locally as the Polícia Judiciária, launched a massive search operation. Sniffer dogs were brought in. The surrounding area was combed. Fields, roadsides, and even abandoned wells were inspected. Helicopters scanned the coastline. Border police were alerted in case Madeleine had been smuggled across into Spain. Nothing was left untouched. Despite the urgency, cracks in the investigation appeared almost immediately. The crime scene had not been properly preserved the night before. Dozens of people, including resort staff and even other holidaymakers, had entered the McCann's apartment after Madeleine was reported missing. Any potential forensic evidence was compromised. Fingerprints, DNA, fibers, everything that could have been crucial to the investigation was now unreliable. Still, investigators pressed on. Witnesses were interviewed, including Jane Tanner, who had reported seeing a man carrying a child around 9:15 p.m. the night Madeleine disappeared. She described him as a slim man, dark-haired, dressed in light-colored trousers and a dark top, holding a little girl who was barefoot and wearing light pajamas. Could this have been Madeleine? The sighting was treated seriously, but there was little to go on. No one else had seen the man, and his identity remained a mystery. Other witnesses came forward with their own reports, claiming they had seen suspicious men in the area in the days leading up to Madeleine's disappearance. Some described men knocking on doors, asking for donations. Others reported seeing vans parked near the resort. But none of these leads led to a breakthrough. Meanwhile, the McCanns themselves stepped into the spotlight. Unlike many families in similar tragedies, they chose to actively engage with the media. On May 7th, just days after Madeleine vanished, they made their first televised appeal. Kate clutched Madeleine's favorite toy, a pink cuddle cat, as she begged for her daughter's return. "Please, please do not hurt her. Please don't hurt her. Please let her come home," she pleaded. The image of Kate McCann holding the stuffed animal became one of the defining visuals of the case. Newspapers around the world printed Madeleine's face alongside it. The McCanns launched a campaign, distributing posters across Europe, setting up a dedicated hotline, and appealing directly to anyone who might have information. Soon, celebrities and public figures lent their voices to the cause. David Beckham, J.K. Rowling, and Pope Benedict XVI expressed support. The Pope even met with the McCanns, blessing a photograph of Madeleine. The case had transcended borders. It was no longer just a Portuguese investigation, but a global mission to find a missing child. But as the spotlight intensified, so too did scrutiny. The media frenzy was relentless. British tabloids ran daily front-page stories. Some speculated about kidnappers and trafficking rings. Others questioned the McCanns' decision to leave their children alone in the apartment while they dined at the tapas bar. Critics argued it was negligent, even reckless. Supporters countered that the parent had been checking regularly and could not have imagined such a tragedy. The Portuguese police, under mounting pressure, pursued multiple theories. At first, the most widely accepted explanation was that Madeleine had been abducted by a stranger. After all, Praia da Luz was a tourist destination, and the McCanns were foreigners. The possibility of a planned abduction, perhaps linked to child trafficking, seemed plausible. But as weeks passed with no evidence of such a network, investigators turned their attention closer to home. By summer 2007, whispers began circulating that the McCanns themselves might be involved. This suspicion stemmed partly from inconsistencies in witness statements. Members of the Tapas 7 gave slightly different timelines of when children were checked that night. Some said shutters were closed, others said they were open. Matthew Oldfield admitted he hadn't actually seen Madeleine in the bed during his 9:30 check, raising questions about exactly when she vanished. Then came the involvement of forensic dogs from the UK. In July 2007, British police specialists brought 2 dogs to Praia da Luz. One trained to detect human blood, the other trained to detect the scent of human cadavers. Inside the McCanns' apartment, the dogs alerted in multiple places, including behind the sofa and inside a wardrobe. Later, when the McCanns' rental car was examined, the cadaver dog again alerted, and traces of blood were reportedly found in the trunk. The results were not definitive. DNA samples were inconclusive and could not be directly matched to Madeleine, but the discoveries fueled suspicion. On September 7, 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann were officially declared arguidos, or suspects, in their daughter's disappearance. The news shocked the world. How could grieving parents become suspects in their own child's case? Portuguese investigators suggested a theory that Madeleine had died in the apartment accidentally, and the parents had staged an abduction to cover it up. The McCanns fiercely denied the allegations. They insisted they had nothing to do with Madeleine's disappearance. Supporters rallied around them, accusing the Portuguese authorities of deflecting from their own failures by blaming the family. The case became deeply polarized. Some believed the McCanns were innocent victims of a botched investigation, while others were convinced they were hiding something. Meanwhile, the search for Madeleine continued. Sightings were reported across Europe and even as far as Morocco, but none were ever confirmed. Countless leads ended in disappointment. The case, despite its global reach, was no closer to being solved. By the end of 2007, the McCanns returned to the UK, still under suspicion but determined to continue the search for their daughter. They established a Find Madeleine Fund, using donations to support private investigators and publicity campaigns. They vowed never to give up hope. For Portuguese authorities, however, the case had grown increasingly complicated. Mounting international criticism, inconclusive forensic results, and lack of evidence left the investigation at a standstill. What began as a desperate search for a missing girl had now become something larger, a battle of public opinion, a media circus, and a case mired in controversy. Madeleine McCann was still missing, and the truth of what happened that night remained locked in silence. The pressure on Portuguese authorities reached a breaking point in July 2008. After more than a year of dead ends, inconclusive forensic evidence, and public backlash, the police judiciary officially closed the case. The arguido status of Kate and Jerry McCann was lifted, and the investigation was archived due to lack of evidence. For many, this felt like the end of the line. But for the McCanns, it was only the beginning of a new chapter. They returned to the UK determined to continue the search privately. The Find Madeleine Fund financed their efforts, hiring private investigators to pursue leads the police had abandoned. In the years that followed, supposed sightings of Madeleine were reported across the globe. From Spain to Belgium, from France to Morocco, people claimed to have seen a little blonde girl who resembled her. Each sighting raised hopes, but each one eventually collapsed under scrutiny. None were ever confirmed. Meanwhile, public opinion remained sharply divided. Some continued to sympathize with the McCanns, viewing them as victims of both a crime and a botched investigation. Others remained suspicious, fueled by tabloid speculation and the unanswered questions about that night in Praia da Luz. The media circus never truly died down. Documentaries, books, and articles kept the case alive in public memory. The British press in particular played a double role, helping keep Madeleine's face in the spotlight, but also fueling conspiracies and sensational stories that sometimes bordered on character assassination. Years passed, but the McCanns refused to let their daughter's case fade. Their persistence eventually paid off. In 2011, 4 years after Madeleine's disappearance, the UK government announced the launch of a new review of the case. This operation, called Operation Grange, was led by London's Metropolitan Police. Prime Minister David Cameron ordered it after direct appeals from the McCanns. Operation Grange's goal was to re-examine every piece of evidence, every statement, every lead, with fresh eyes. Detectives combed through thousands of documents from both the Portuguese investigation and private inquiries. They interviewed witnesses, tracked down suspects, and followed up on long-forgotten clues. By 2013, the British police released new findings on a televised program. They revealed 2 crucial updates. 1. The sighting reported by Jane Tanner at 9:15 p.m., the man carrying a child, was likely not related to Madeleine's disappearance. Investigators determined it was probably another holidaymaker carrying his own daughter back to his apartment. This revelation eliminated what had been one of the cornerstone sightings in the case. 2. A new timeline emerged. Police suggested the most likely window for Madeleine's disappearance was between 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m., when Jerry had already checked on the children, but before Kate discovered her missing. This meant any abduction would have occurred later than originally believed. The review reignited hope. Forensic evidence was retested with modern technology. Old suspects were re-examined. New appeals were made to the public. But again, progress was slow. Operation Grange cost millions of pounds, yet for years, it seemed to produce no breakthrough. Many criticized it as a political move designed to appease public opinion rather than solve the case. Still, one lead would eventually stand out. In 2020, German prosecutors announced they had a new prime suspect, a man named Christian Bruckner. Bruckner, a German national, was a convicted sex offender with a long criminal history, including crimes against children. At the time of Madeleine's disappearance in 2007, he was living in the Algarve region of Portugal, not far from Praia da Luz. Investigators linked him to a camper van and phone records placing him in the area on the night Madeleine vanished. The revelation shook the case once again. German authorities stated publicly that they believed Madeleine was dead and that Bruckner was responsible. However, as of today, no concrete evidence has been produced tying him directly to her disappearance. No body has ever been found. Bruckner himself denies any involvement, though he remains imprisoned in Germany for unrelated offenses. For the McCanns, the announcement brought a mix of emotions. On one hand, it offered a possible explanation after more than a decade of uncertainty. On the other, it was yet another chapter without closure, without proof, without Madeleine. The case remains open. Operation Grange continues, though its funding has been repeatedly questioned. Portuguese authorities also maintain their own investigation, though cooperation between the two countries has often been strained. Today, more than 16 years after that fateful night, Madeleine McCann's disappearance remains one of the most famous unsolved cases in history. Her face, frozen in time at age 3, still appears on missing persons posters, in news articles, and on social media. Theories continue to swirl. Some believe she was kidnapped by an opportunistic predator. Others suspect she was taken by a child trafficking network. A smaller, more skeptical group insists her parents know more than they have revealed. None of these theories, however, have ever been proven. What is undeniable is the impact of the case. It reshaped how missing children are investigated, sparking reforms in police cooperation across Europe. It showed the power and the danger of media in criminal cases. And it left behind a haunting legacy, a little girl whose disappearance continues to echo through time. For Kate and Jerry McCann, the fight goes on. In interviews, they maintain their belief that Madeleine could still be alive. They continue to mark her birthday each year, refusing to let her memory fade. But for the world, the question lingers. What really happened to Madeleine McCann on that warm night in Portugal? Until the truth is uncovered, the case will remain a chilling reminder how one moment can change everything, and how some mysteries refuse to be solved. Thank you for watching this story on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, one of the most high-profile missing persons cases in modern history. This video is based on publicly available information, media reports, and official statements. It does not make any accusations or reach conclusions beyond what has been documented by investigators and news sources. The Madeleine McCann case remains unsolved, and all individuals mentioned are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories and mysteries from around the world. And most importantly, if you have any information related to the case, please report it to the proper authorities.